Hi, this is Anthony and welcome back to my show. This is already the 10th DB Cooper comment and Q&A segment that I've done. I've gotten a couple comments from people telling me to stop doing them because I've covered everything. But obviously if people keep on sending me questions and I get far more questions and comments than I can keep up on responding to, then I think that there's some value to it. Plus, if I respond to individual people's messages, then they and only other people that choose to go down and look at messages will see the answers, even though it's the type of information that somebody that has an interest in the DB Cooper case would possibly want to be aware of. And the order that I'm taking these today is pretty much just the most recent ones, going back just to keep track of them so I don't miss many. The first comment is about the tie, which obviously is potentially a big piece of evidence. Or as I point out, it could be a red herring that might lead some people astray, so we need to be cautious. I personally believe that the tie left on the plane was the one worn by the skyjacker known as DB Cooper. I believe that it's likely that it was the tie that he normally wore in the course of his work. Without question, it's agreed that it was an inexpensive tie sold for a few years in the mid to late 1960s at JCPenney. As I and many other people have discussed in many of the videos concerning the tie, ties are something that do not typically get washed unless you spill a bunch of food on it and it gets discolored. I think that we all agree that men back at the time wore ties at work, including in laboratories, much more than they do now. Having a clip-on tie would be convenient if you needed to take it off while you were eating lunch, or if you had on occasion to get into machinery where the tie might be in your way. I'm not saying that people that worked on the shop floor would be wearing ties, but their supervisors and managers and engineers would likely wear ties and come into contact with particular metallic and other industrial particles. I think we're all aware now that there seems to be at least 3 particles of a titanium alloy. There seems to be many particles of pure titanium that were on the tie, among other substances, including a lot of things that could be connected to the high-tech and aerospace industries. I think that what was on the tie can help us narrow down who Cooper was, but we need to be very careful with how we use that information so we don't misidentify a person. And we have to remember that the particles that we're talking about are evidently about 1/10 of the width of a human hair, so very small. And quite frankly, as some people have pointed out, we don't know how much of that titanium might be floating around an airliner when it's that small. It would be interesting if you could get ties from that era that we know passengers wore, or even the air crew had worn, and check it for titanium and of course other substances. It could be that because we're dealing with such small particles that the air was sufficiently full of them that people's clothing are going to pick up some aerospace material particles when they fly on a plane. And also, even though I and many other people believe that the tie belonged to the skyjacker, to be clear, we don't know if it was his or if he perhaps picked it up at a secondhand store. I don't think that that happened. I think that this was a cheap tie that he intended to discard in the course of his hijacking, or at least take it off and put it in his pocket. If he was successful, he was going to get $200,000. This tie retailed for less than $3, so it's not like he's throwing away something expensive or dear to him. I think the reason he took it off is he didn't need it flapping in his face as he jumped out of the plane. He may have forgotten it and was intending to put it in his pocket just so that he wasn't leaving behind any evidence, but I don't think that he left it there to throw off people, and DNA testing was not something that could be done at the time. And I'm sure that he was not thinking that there would be microscopic particles that 50 years later people would be arguing about trying to determine his identity. And lastly, as I point out in all of my tie videos, I believe that he wore the tie in the course of his work, but you can't assume that he was therefore an engineer. I posit that it could be that he was a government inspector of some type that took him to various places where he could have picked up these particles. As he told the flight attendant, he had a grudge, but not a grudge against her airline. If he had been a veteran, came back, had issues with the VA, got a job as some type of safety or industrial inspector, he may have had a grudge against the federal government. Just a thought. But excellent observation, thank you. Bud always has good comments, and few mention Cooper's paper bag full of necessary equipment. So evidently, besides the attache case, which carried a bomb or something that looked like a bomb, it was reported that Cooper had a paper bag. Who knows what was in it? But certainly anybody intending to skydive, especially in those conditions that night, would want to wear goggles. So there were perhaps goggles in the paper bag and perhaps other things such as gloves. We just don't know for sure what would have been in the bag, but good observation and something that needs to be kept in mind when considering if he could survive and make it out of that area upon landing. And here's another comment from our old friend John Hancock, which may or may not be his real name. Perhaps he's just a fan of the American founding father of that name. And of course, as he starts out, he's addressing it to me. I'll read the whole thing and then I'll go through it bit by bit. You, sir, are a world-class idiot. Basing your opinion on one single aspect is incredibly suspect while revealing your own personal bias. So just the facts and evidence. Cooper McCoy sat in the same seat on both aircraft. Used the very same identical FAA index cards to pass information to and from the pilots via the stewardess. The cache found by Brian Ingram in 1980 confirmed what McCoy had said to the FBI in 1971. Cooper lost the money. Cooper McCoy hijacked the same aircraft, used the same identical MO. I'll blow up the plane unless my demands are met. Had both aircraft parked in remote spots far away from other buildings. Had the refueling trucks park in the exact same spot where they could be observed. Both hijackers were in total control. Both allowed all the passengers to the plane once the cash and parachutes were delivered. Both used the same sentence, no funny stuff, and on and one it goes. So yes, you, sir, are without doubt extremely disingenuous, hard to take seriously, and have the very same monetary motives displayed by many others who haven't the slightest moral character. So here he refers to me as a world-class idiot. Well, if one's going to be an idiot, then one should strive to be a world-class idiot rather than some two-bit provincial idiot that nobody knows about. He goes on, quote, basing your opinion on one single aspect is incredibly suspect while revealing your own personal bias. Well, I'm not basing my opinion on one single aspect. I'm talking about the many things that tend to exclude Richard Floyd McCoy. And the commenter is commenting on one of the Q&A videos that I did, but I've also done one just on why I think Richard Floyd McCoy was not Cooper, although he did successfully, to a degree, hijack a plane about 5.5 months later. I don't know why anything would be incredibly suspect. I'm extremely transparent in explaining why I believe things, and I point out that I may be wrong. And that's something that we all need to remember. Until Cooper can be definitively identified, if for instance DNA was found on the tie that could be tied back to a particular person who could have carried out the skyjacking and, say, disappeared the night before Thanksgiving 1971 and never showed up to work after that, I think most people would then accept, yes, we found Cooper. But until then, even if you're really sure that it was McCoy or Braden or a Peterson, we need to still be cautious. But again, I don't think I'm being biased. I mention in just about every one of my videos that I do about McCoy that after I saw the first video that Dan Gryder did, I was convinced that McCoy was Cooper. But of course, Gryder only shows that evidence that supports that contention. And if you have an open mind and think critically, especially when you watch a second video, you see that there are more holes in it than there is in Swiss cheese. And after I posted one of my earliest D.B. Cooper videos where I said I thought that the case had been solved and that McCoy was Cooper, people pointed out glaring inconsistencies, and then I saw them. So yeah, I do not think that there is any strong evidence that McCoy was Cooper. There is some circumstantial evidence, and there are certain things which are said to be evidence which no longer are being used as evidence, but nobody on that side of the aisle admits that evidence is faulty or suspect. So Mr. Hancock just wants to look at the facts and evidence. And again, where are you finding your facts and evidence? Is it only coming from the book The Real McCoy and from Dan Gryder? Then you need to be cautious. Mr. Hancock says that Cooper McCoy sat in the same seat. Well, technically Cooper sat in seat 18E and McCoy sat in seat 20D. If you just Google what seats they sat in, that's what comes up. Now, it's probably the case where the two planes were not exactly identical as far as where seats were located, and those most likely were the last seats in the back of the plane. Is that a smoking gun? No. Anybody with half a brain who is going to do anything nefarious on a plane is going to sit in the back row. You don't want people coming up behind you. That's just common sense. Having the fuel truck parked in the same spot is common sense. You want it as far away from the plane as possible, up to the front and out the window where you can see it. And by the way, I checked, those type of planes are fueled from the front. Even though the fuel truck was ordered to sit in a particular spot, both hijackers asked for it to be placed there using very different directions. Again, evidence does not necessarily tie them together. And as it's pointed out in one of the narratives about McCoy skyjacking, some of the people at the fuel truck were wearing dress shoes, indicating that they were FBI agents wearing fuel truck employee overalls. As far as both skyjackers using identical FAA index cards, I don't know about that. Why would you need to use an FAA index card and not some other piece of paper or a non-FAA index card? Giving notes to the stewardess to give to the pilots is not a smoking gun. Who else are you going to give messages to give to the pilots? You're only going to give them to the stewardesses, especially when you let the people off the plane. So that's not a similarity that proves anything. Also, letting passengers off the plane in both cases proves nothing. You don't want a bunch of passengers, including people who could be air marshals or off-duty cops, sitting on the plane with you that could interfere with your skyjacking. So again, no relevance there. You talk about the cache confirming what McCoy had said to the FBI in 1971. What did McCoy say to the FBI in 1971? That he was Cooper, but he lost the money? I doubt that he said that, since I don't think that they talked to him in 1971, because McCoy's skyjacking took place in 1972. You seem to think that McCoy said to the FBI that he was Cooper, and he did the second skyjacking because he lost the first skyjacking ransom. Where's your evidence for this? And if that was true, then why wouldn't the FBI prosecute him for the first skyjacking also? You point out that Cooper McCoy hijacked the same type of aircraft and used the same identical MO. Well, you have to remember that there aren't that many different types of commercial aircraft. And if you heard about somebody that used the aft staircase to jump out and you were thinking about carrying out the same type of skyjacking, you're going to want to use the same type of aircraft, because there are no other commercial aircraft that I know of at the time that you could jump out of, especially those that had an aft staircase. Any skyjacker would be limited to that particular type of aircraft if they intended to parachute out of it mid-flight. You mentioned that he said that he'll blow up the plane unless my demands are met. I think that you're just making that quote up. That's not what I've read. What I've seen is people claim that both skyjackers said that they wanted no funny business, which of course is said in every TV program and movie at the time when people were robbing a bank or something like that. So, well, that's not a clue. Again, I mentioned about the fuel trucks. Of course, any skyjacker is going to want the planes away from any place that the FBI or federal marshals or the police could hide and try to storm the plane. You said both hijackers were in total control. Both allowed the passengers to deplane. Clearly, Cooper was in control. If you read anything about McCoy, he was out of control. He almost got into a fight with one of the passengers. When Cooper skyjacked the plane, passengers didn't know about it. They were told that there was a maintenance issue. Some of the people on McCoy's plane knew that they were being skyjacked. Each of the skyjackers used different weapons. McCoy wore an obvious garish disguise, which is what attracted people, before he even started waving the gun around, to realize that he was a skyjacker. So, no reasonable, intelligent person reading the description of the two skyjackings would think that the skyjackers behaved in a similar manner. So then Mr. Hancock continues with his attack on my integrity, saying that you, sir, are without doubt extremely disingenuous, hard to take seriously, and have the same monetary motives displayed by many others who haven't the slightest moral character. Again, I'm sorry that Mr. Hancock is so butthurt that I don't agree with him that based on his erroneous facts that Richard Floyd McCoy was the skyjacker. Again, I used to believe that McCoy was Cooper, but when you look at all the evidence, not just the evidence that people selling a book such as The Real McCoy, or people like Dan Gryder, who I have some serious issues with as far as his accuracy and integrity, well, I just do not believe that McCoy was Cooper. As far as me having monetary motives, as I point out in a number of my videos, if you watch them, I am not currently monetized. I am working to achieve this channel becoming monetized, which requires me to have at least 4,000 view hours within a year, which I have achieved, in large part thanks to my Cooper videos, and I need to have 1,000 subscribers. As you can see from the screenshot, I currently have 549 subscribers, so I need 451 more until I can get monetized. By the way, here's a screenshot from a website called Social Blade, which looks at people like YouTube creators and tries to estimate how much money they're making. Now, because I'm not monetized, I'm not making any money, but if I was, you can see from their estimates based on my views that I would be making between $4 and $63 a month. And the last few days, it estimates that I would be making between 8 cents and $1 or $2 a day. So, if you think I'm behind some type of grand conspiracy to besmirch the integrity of Richard Floyd McCoy as being D.B. Cooper for profit, then you can believe that. But I don't think anyone else is going to believe it when you look at those stats. So here's one from Steve Allen, and it looks like he is supporting Tom K. I think Tom has some relevant things that he has found and proposed, but as I pointed out in a number of videos, we need to be very careful concerning the diatoms found on the money. I have some reservations about the methodology that he discussed concerning that. I've pointed out in a number of videos that his original findings, which are still on his website, concerning the tie are in direct opposition to the current understanding of what types of titanium were found on the tie. The copyright notice on the Citizen Sleuths website is still 2017, so I don't know if they've updated things since then. But certainly there are some issues with the titanium particles that should be updated on it, I believe. Okay, let's move on. Here, Wendy has an excellent point. I'm not going to read this out loud. Here's a screenshot of her message, and then I've copied and pasted her comments onto subsequent slides so that my viewers can more easily read what she has to say about loafers and other types of shoes. Again, if you don't have enough time to read them all, you just have to hit the pause button and that'll give you more time to read them. I have pointed out that if Cooper was wearing slip-on loafers, as was described, then those would literally be just about the worst type of shoes to jump in. I suppose if you wore flip-flops, that would be slightly worse. But wearing slip-on shoes like that, diving out of a plane in terrible, windy, rainy, sub-freezing weather over an area that has a lot of mountains and forests, as well as having received a fair amount of rain, would not be good shoes to land in and then have to walk out of the area wearing. So I think that what Wendy has to say here is an extremely useful suggestion. And then again, back to a previous comment, we don't know what was in the paper bag. He may have had jump boots in the paper bag too. But this is why I like to do videos like this and get people's feedback. It's because no one, including myself, has all the facts and all the good logical conclusions. But working together, we can hash out things and hopefully come to a better understanding of the situation. So once again, thank you so much for those comments, Wendy. Here Ed writes, why did Cooper choose the flight he did? He could have picked an area with warmer weather and kinder terrain. I believe he chose the area because he was familiar with it, and he felt it gave him an advantage to escape. It wasn't going to be easy to find him before he got away. I agree with you 100%. Now, I'm not an expert on criminals. True crime is not really all that interesting to me, except for a few unsolved cases like D.B. Cooper or the Zodiac. But my understanding is that the overwhelming evidence is that criminals commit their crimes near where they live, within reason. Now, we've had somebody in this general area where I live that was stealing catalytic converters from cars and wasn't just in the person's immediate neighborhood, but in the general region, the metropolitan area of Portland. Now, if you're going to steal catalytic converters at night, then you might be willing to travel 20 or 30 or 45 minutes from where you live to do so. And of course, the consequence of getting caught is low compared to the consequences of being caught committing a violent crime. So, if you're going someplace to commit a violent crime, it seems like history bears out that people are often doing it closer to home so that they can escape and get back to safety. And even though some people want to deny it, hijacking a plane and threatening to blow it up is to a degree a violent crime, even if the bomb was not real. Now, obviously, that's not true 100% of the time. And obviously, with people who are like truckers that are serial killers or whatever, they may commit their crimes far from home, but still close to the route that they're driving. And again, it's not totally impossible for somebody to go to another area to commit a crime, but again, less likely. So I think that when you have candidates like Vince Peterson or William Smith who live on the East Coast, or even McCoy who's from Utah, why would they come to the Pacific Northwest during nasty weather in wintertime and commit the crime here rather than doing it closer to home, just as McCoy did? McCoy jumped out of the plane over Provo, Utah, his hometown. So I think that one could logically conclude that Cooper was likely from the Portland-Vancouver area. Some might argue that people from outside the area had some familiarity with the region. Perhaps they had been stationed at Fort Lewis. Again, just because you have familiarity with the area, even if you survive, you're still going to need to get from Portland or Vancouver back to Pennsylvania or Utah. So that tends to argue for somebody who could jump out of the plane near the Columbia, walk across the bridge, and then they're home. So great comment. I agree with you 100%. Here Michael is referencing the supposed bomb that Cooper showed to Tina Mucklow. I think that the understanding probably was that the sticks of dynamite that she saw were wrapped in red paper, which is what many people assume dynamite to look like. But as a few people have pointed out, dynamite actually is wrapped in yellow or lighter colored paper, which I verified from the website of a dynamite manufacturer. I think that if somebody was going to construct a fake bomb, that they would either use red paper to wrap up the tubes to look like it was dynamite or what we think dynamite should look like, or else they use something like road flares or emergency distress flares, which could be shot into the air, which I think are often wrapped in red paper. And of course, some type of flare would be useful potentially if Cooper needed to contact an accomplice. Of course, we know that there was a rash of skyjackings for various reasons at this general time in history, especially in the Middle East. Some airliners, after they were landed, would be blown up. I personally don't think that Cooper was carrying a live bomb. It doesn't make any sense if he wants to survive, as he's not going to blow up the plane, and he doesn't want a bomb that could accidentally go off. So having some type of flares or a dummy bomb makes more sense to me. Okay, here is somebody that is suggesting that Dan Gryder bought his subs, that is subscribers. This comes from a comment in a previous Q&A video where I said that I thought that the biggest mystery in the whole D.B. Cooper situation is how is it that Eric Ulis has only about 1,250 subscribers and Dan Gryder has 95,000 subscribers. Well, I don't want to make Dan mad because he's party to a lot of litigation if you look him up. But in his defense, I don't think that he bought his subscribers. I believe that his channel is not monetized. At least at one point, I believe in one of his videos, he said that it wasn't. And so if your channel is not going to be monetized, then there's no reason to buy subscribers, really. Also, I have to give it to him. He states that he runs some type of organization that helps animals and asks for donations, but he admits that they're not a nonprofit as far as tax purposes, so your donations are not tax deductible. So he suggests that you just donate a few dollars. I think that that's the action of a stand-up guy, so I have to respect him for that he's not trying to make a bunch of money off of animals there. So as far as whatever criticisms or critiques people could have of Dan and his documentaries, I don't think that he bought subscribers. I think that this is just an interesting topic and that he has, with his videos, accumulated a lot of subscribers and supporters to his contention about Richard Floyd McCoy being D.B. Cooper. Okay, I think I'll stop here. Of course, if you haven't already, I would really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss anything. I do appreciate comments. And if you like this video, click the like button also. That really helps me out. Thanks so much.